newstalkzb.co.nz.
It's Mike Hosking.
It's 7:13. Welcome to the first of our Newstalk ZB election breakfasts. We're at Mikano restaurant on the Auckland waterfront. The guest is Labour leader Phil Goff. For the next 90 minutes, the policies, the beliefs, the philosophies of his party in this campaign of 2011. Your questions via the text or email zbzb or mike at newstalkzb.co.nz. I will take the questions from the audience here this morning as well, and the program is being streamed on the Newstalk ZB website, newstalkzb.co.nz, as well as the New Zealand Herald website as well. Phil Goff, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Let's talk about some of the weekend stuff, the here and now, first of all. The polls and the way you read them, and why is it that people perhaps don't see things the way you do?
Well, I think people make up their mind quite late in the day in the polls. A lot of the political science studies show that. We've got the policies out there that I think put us on side with New Zealanders. I think New Zealanders got 12 days to make a decision. Do they want to sell their assets or do they want to keep them? If they want to sell the assets, well, John Key's the man. If you want to keep the assets, the power companies, Air New Zealand, I reckon the whole lot actually, KiwiSaver, the government's talking about selling more, a partnership between ACT and National. Don Brashy wants to sell the lot. This election is about whether you want to own your future, whether you want to own those assets, and 3-1 New Zealanders want to do that. When they go into that polling booth, the decision they're making is, will we keep these assets for the next generations and the dividends they give us, or will we hop them off?
Are you worried about the polls?
Oh, look, you don't focus on the polls, you don't worry about it. The old saying, there's only one poll that counts, it's the one on the day. There are all sorts of things that happen in the last 2 weeks of a campaign. We've seen it before, we'll see it again.
Perhaps the most stark contrast we've seen so far is the asset sales program. You're on about the asset sales program. People don't like the asset sales program if you refer to the polls, and yet you seemingly can't get any traction on it. How come?
Oh, you do get traction out in the road. You're eyeballing people out in the street. You're going to the public meetings. We had 150, 200 people at Dunedin yesterday. When you talk about those assets and a cross-section of people, some for us, some against us, one thing they were united on, they don't believe those assets should be sold.
Doesn't change the vote, though. Why is that?
I think people are still making up their mind on that one.
Really? So,
Yep.
So the polls will turn. When will they turn by?
Well, who knows? I'm not here to analyse those. I'm here to sell the policy and say why it's so important in 12 days' time people vote to own their own future, vote to keep their assets. They want to keep their assets, but if they're sold this time, they're gone forever, and the dividends with them.
All right, we'll touch on this throughout the morning, I'm sure. The other weekend issues, the cup of tea. How can the cup of tea be a rort when it's part of a system that you endorse?
I support an MMP system, but I don't support the sort of rort that says a party that nobody wants in Parliament, a party that wouldn't get anywhere near Parliament unless another party gifted it a seat so it could smuggle other members into Parliament.
But that's a machination of MMP.
Yeah, and that's why I think, while I support MMP, the law should be changed to stop that. You should either be elected because you've got the electorate, or you pass the 5% threshold and then you get a proportionate number. But we've seen last election and this election a deliberate attempt to rort the electorate. I don't think the people of Epsom admire that. They don't want an ACT member of Parliament, and I think New Zealanders as a whole think that is ripping the system off. It's a gerrymander.
The recording event over the weekend, what would you have done if it was you?
Well, if I was sitting in a very public place with 12 television cameras peering through the window at me, I'd be very careful about my conversation, and I imagine the two of them were. Look, I'm not in favour of secret recordings or anything like that. It's up to the Prime Minister whether he releases the material. What were they talking about? Well, I'm imagining that they were talking about which assets they were going to flog off next.
Would you have released the material?
If in that public arena my conversation would have been such, I would have been happy to release it, but that's up to the Prime Minister.
Would you have taken legal action?
No, I don't think so.
All right, also over the weekend, no limit on DPB. Why?
No limit on...
No limit on DPB. You can have as many children as you want. There is no expectation that being on the DPB at any point you would go out to find work.
We expect social responsibility from people, but we don't always get it. We expect them to be personally responsible. Often they're not. In most cases, people on the DPB are people whose marriages have broken up, they're in a hard position, they're there for a brief period of time, they need the support and they get the support. There are cabinet ministers who have utilised the system, and good luck to them when they need it. What we don't want is people staying long-term dependent on the benefit.
But you're not doing anything about it?
We absolutely will be doing things about it.
Like what?
And the two things, first of all, yeah, I am in favour of people going out and working and standing on their own feet, but make sure the jobs are there first. You know, I hear all this talk about, well, we'll wave the big stick, we'll get them out into jobs. But I've got to tell you this, that when there was a new supermarket opening in my electorate, 150 jobs, 2,700 people were queuing up for those jobs. So you tell a mother with a one-year-old child that she's going to be readily employable out there, you know, with an employer that knows if she's got a couple of kids that when the kids are ill she needs to be with them, she's going to find it really hard. The best thing to do is to give people the skills, give them the skills so that they can go out and they can find work. Let me give you a great example of that, something that I found really quite inspirational. It's called a Teen Support Unit. We run them in different places around the country. They're young women who get pregnant. The Teen Support Unit works by keeping them in school, having the creche right next door to them. They're learning, they're going on, they're completing their education, they're going on to further study. I visited one a couple of years ago, and a couple of the young women wrote to me to say they'd just finished their first year university. They were thriving, they were doing really well. That support, that motivation, that assistance gets people back on their feet. You don't have to wave the big stick at a mother with a one-year-old and say, somehow we expect you to go out and on $10.40 an hour, which is what we're going to pay you, find childcare for your kid.
This is the Phil Goff.